We have Professor Arthur C. Clarke visiting India again. Now, Arthur C. Clarke to most people is not known as Professor Arthur C. Clarke because they have read so many of his books. He is truly a remarkable person, and I have the greatest difficulty in categorizing him. Is he a writer? Is he a futurologist only? Is he a technologist? Is he a scientist? He defies all description. He goes under the ocean. He does all kinds of crazy things. But by all accounts, he's a very remarkable man. Born in England, he lives in Sri Lanka. He produces movies, he produces TV series. There are centers known after him. There are some people who insist that the synchronous orbit in which the INSAT goes around the Earth, for example, at 36,000 kilometers, that it should be called Clarke orbit. And many people do call it Clarke orbit because years ago he prophesied that such an orbit could be used for communication very effectively, worldwide communication. So he's a difficult man to describe, but a very, very remarkable man of this half century. And so we're very happy he's here once again. He has been coming to us very often, good friend of many people in this country, and very much involved in some of our programs. This time he's here to give the Nehru Memorial Lecture, and so I probably shouldn't say what he's going to say in that lecture, though I know a little bit, and this would be known to people. But there is another aspect of his personality, and I think we'll explore some of these things in conversation with you, Arthur, today. Tell me, what are your current real enthusiasms?
Well, my current real enthusiasm, believe it or not, is a small puppy that I just acquired, a Rhodesian Ridgeback about this big, which I've always had dogs. I had a series of German Shepherds, and the last one died a month ago, and now I've switched to Rhodesian Ridgebacks. So that is my current enthusiasm. And the two little girls, who are my partner's children in Colombo. And that's one reason why I'm not going to leave Colombo anymore, because everything I love is there. The puppy and the little girls. But my intellectual enthusiasm, well, I'm involved in quite a few books still, and a couple of movies, and I've got a magnificent new telescope, a 14-inch Celestron, which I hope to install on the roof, and well, I have plenty to keep me busy.
Tell me, over the years that you've been writing science fiction, and you've been doing other things in between, has your concept of fiction, of science fiction, changed?
Yes, very much so. In the early days, when I started writing, just now 50 years ago,
yes,
the emphasis was on the gee whiz technology,
yes,
scientific gimmick, and very little consideration of human factors. And, in fact, many of the stories at the time were just transplanted westerns, you know, another Martian bit the dust,
yes,
kind of
yes,
thing. But now, of course, science fiction has become a very respected genre, and many distinguished writers of what sometimes called mainstream literature are getting interested in it. Of course, many great writers wrote science fiction. Kipling wrote some excellent science fiction, but H.G. Wells is perhaps the best-known protagonist, and he wrote, you know, classic works of non-science fiction. In my own case, I have graduated more and more to the human side of things, and the novel I've been working on for 20 years, The Songs of Distant Earth, which I regard as my magnum opus, it's almost entirely concerned with human relationships rather than technology, even though there is a great deal of technology involved.
You know, you are also a great enthusiast about what some of the new technologies can do for people. And sometimes people think that you tend to give too much credit to technology. You think that there is some kind of inevitability as to how people will be because of technology. Now, these are those people who don't know the other side, and that you keep on worrying about other side.
Fortunately, as technology becomes cheaper and cheaper and simpler, we've seen this happening with personal computers.
Yes.
They're spreading all over the world. They're very expensive. In fact, no one could possibly afford them. Now they're becoming so cheap that very soon almost anybody in any school will have some kind of personal computer. Video equipment, I mean, we have a room full of it, but you can get away with a small camera.
Yes.
So more and more technology, as technology spreads, people will adapt to their own needs and their own, their own environment.
I think that's how it should go, except somehow technology is presented as such a, with so much awe around it, that people have not realized that the present day technology has a flexibility that it can be put together in many different ways. And this doesn't usually come out of the writings and sayings of many enthusiasts, not even in this country. And this is one of the things which I keep on arguing, and we have discussed it on several occasions. Remember about satellites?
Right. Anti-Clarke orbit.
Anti-Clarke orbit. And anti-Clarke orbit.
The children are now taking for granted these electronic toys, and that is demystifying the computers and things, which to the older generation are, they're terrified. That keyboard, it scares them, but the children will take it completely for granted. The 3-year-old in my house is playing with my computer.
But do you think, it's changing topic a wee bit, but connected with this, when you say taking for granted, we take our automobiles for granted, our computers for granted, our TV sets. And many people say, well, see, the society is becoming scientific and technological. But clearly that's not so. We're just using these things. When you take them for granted, in some sense you may even get away from a situation where you would have a chance of creating things yourself, understanding.
Well, the technology should be transparent, to use a phrase which is getting more popular. So you don't know it is there. And this is certainly true with word processors. I mean, I've made this great switch myself from typewriters to word processors, and I can't imagine ever using a typewriter again. Just as anyone who uses a typewriter could never imagine going back to pen and ink. I would rather go back to pen and ink than go back to a typewriter after using a word processor. And a good word processing system should be transparent. You're not aware of all the things that are going on in the computer as you move paragraphs around and check your spelling. It should be a tool which is invisible.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if the tremendous energies, creative energies and drive which major countries have could be put together for cooperative programs, for example, exploring the planetary system or going to Mars, or exploiting the resources of the moon, or all kinds of large cities. Do you think this is a possible way out, and doesn't it look like a gimmick?
Well, I think it's not only possible, but it's inevitable if we're to survive. And there now is a movement in this direction. I'm very happy for and particularly happy that the Americans and the Russians are quietly getting together in space in many ways that the public doesn't know about. And there's serious talk of a joint Mars expedition, perhaps in the early next century. There's much more cooperation in space technology, space science, than one would imagine from reading the newspaper headlines.
Yeah. Do you think of it some kind of sublimation of unspent energy? You think aggressive?
Okay, the moral equivalent of war. We have the spatial equivalent of war.
But why? I mean,
we are aggressive animals. We need some outlet.
Are we?
Yeah, you should see a British football match.
Is that inevitable? Because one keeps wondering that here are these tremendous energies. How come humanity can't use these energies on a whole lot of agendas here on the ground? I mean, look at the state of the world.
Yes, but when I said aggressive, there's nothing wrong with aggression as long as it's directed against nature. And then, of course, it shouldn't be overdone because we have to cooperate with nature.
That's terrible. We should not be aggressive towards
I guess it depends on the definition of the word aggression. I don't mean enmity, hostility, but some kind of, let's say, development or even exploitation. Or that is perhaps as unfortunate.
Yes.
Exploration, okay, discovery,
yes.
Exploration. Those are sublimations of aggression, if you like. Would we explore? Would we have scientific research if we were not perhaps basically hunting animals? Is that all part of our human nature? And that is a positive application of those dark instincts.
Arthur, you were a radar officer or something like that during the war, weren't you?
That's right, yes.
And it is at that time you thought of this possibility of worldwide communication. Was it, or was it later?
No, it was during the war. In fact, as the war was coming to an end, in 1944, I was working on a very advanced microwave radar, ground-controlled approach,
yes.
talk-down system. At the same time, I was in discussions with my colleagues in the British Interplanetary Society,
yes.
the post-war, the pre-war space cadets, saying, how can we get people interested in space travel? So I said, well, what can rockets, what can space technology do to make money, to pay for our dream of going to the moon and planets? And it was the combination of working on radar, communication technology, and thinking about satellites and rockets that melded together and gave me the concept of using satellites for radio and TV broadcasting. I was quite certain that it would come about. In fact, my original title for the essay was The Future of World Communications,
yes.
which of course didn't tell you what it was about, and the editor chose a title, Extraterrestrial Relays, which of course was a perfectly accurate descriptive title, but my original title was The Future of World Communications. I was sure that that was the answer, but I did not imagine it would come so quickly. I referred maybe to the end of the century. You know.
Did it strike to you as something rather nice and remarkable while doing this paper, or you sort of said, oh, it's...
Well, the idea of a stationary orbit goes back to the 20s. I mean,
yes.
In fact, I don't know who first said in print that an orbit, such an orbit was possible. It could have, anybody from the time of Newton onwards could very perfectly obvious.
Totally obvious.
And the early space pioneers in the 1920s had discussed the use of that orbit for putting space stations. There's one thing I did miss, it's rather interesting. I didn't mention the time lag, and it takes a fraction of a second to get up back. So when you're talking to anybody over a telephone link, if you talk fast and interrupt each other, you can get in real trouble. Now, the reason why I knew, of course, it would take time to get there and back, but I didn't bother to calculate it. And the reason why is I was much more interested in the television broadcasting aspect, where it doesn't matter about time.
That's right. Yeah, but you see, it's remarkable how people have got used to this time.
Exactly. I mean, at one time, in fact, my friend John Pierce at the Bell Labs, they were quite sure that they would have to use low-altitude satellites moving around fast, simply because of the time lag. Now, the long-term answer, of course, the long-term answer is the low-altitude synchronous, the low-altitude stationary satellite, which stays hovering over the same spot on the Earth, only a few 1,000 kilometers. That is quite a technological problem, as you know.
Your space elevator.
The space elevator. Right.
Yes, yes. Could you tell a little bit about this? I mean,
yes.
I think it'd be best to hear. You have written about it even in your fiction. I think you have written otherwise and thought about it.
Yes, in fact, I have a technical article in my collection of essays, Ascent to Orbit, the space elevator. It's only an intellectual concept at the moment. The idea is quite simple, even though it may be rather fantastic. Let's suppose this is the Earth, and here we do have the stationary satellite moving at the same speed, 36,000 kilometers up, so it stays at the same spot over the equator as the Earth turns. Well, in principle, you could lay a cable from the equator out to the satellite, and then you would have a means of sending up payloads by an elevator, by purely electric energy, and it costs only about $1 a pound, or let's 50 cents a kilogram, something of that order, to send payloads into space in terms of energy, instead of thousands of dollars a kilogram. It takes by rocket power.
Because you throw so much
you waste so much of the rocket fuel just lifting other rocket fuel. Yes. You're fighting an exponential law all the time. So the idea of the space elevator, which was first conceived by a Russian engineer Yuri Aksutanov in Leningrad, it's a wonderful dream. The great problem is there any material strong enough to hang down from 36,000 kilometers?
That's right.
The longest, if you make a thread of ordinary materials, even strong as steel, you can only hang vertically for a few scores of kilometers where it snaps under its own weight.
But theoretically there can be.
Now, there are materials like Kevlar, I always say trademark, they can hang several hundred kilometers under its own weight before it snaps. That's a uniform cable. Now, then, if you taper the cables, it gets thicker, then there's no limit. And in theory, you can make such a cable to come from synchronous orbit or stationary all the way down to the Earth. You could use the space elevator for two purposes. One is to get from the Earth's surface up to the synchronous orbit. And then if, as it would in fact have to do, the system's extended beyond, you could go out there and it'd be like a sling. And if you let go at the end, you'd be slung off in any direction you want. You could go sail onto the planets.
I always thought it is not an impossible idea, but these kinds of examples to be worked at in detail would be a very nice way of learning dynamics and science and strengths of materials at the theoretical limit. And we don't normally pursue these well enough in our educational programs. You know, people say neutron star as a laboratory for studying mechanics.
I mean, it's much more exciting than sort of masses sliding down inclined planes. It's dynamic, and
I don't know how many people have given up physics
because of dull examples.
Yes. Arthur, I've read some of your fiction coming back to this, and also we have talked about many things, about what's happening in the world, what's the future, who are the actors. And I have noticed that you have a capability of being involved and yet detached. And detached in a way that in your world there are no really wicked people or wicked societies or wicked countries, really wicked. Would you respond to this? Is this true?
It's a very good point. I don't think I've ever had any villains in any of my stories. I've had people whose actions were deplorable, but usually they thought they were doing something not necessarily bad. And this is true. The human nature is not black and white.
Yes.
And even nations, although there can be sort of crazy administrations and crazy governments, as we see too often nowadays, I try to avoid painting people as villainous, because just as I avoid disastrous and catastrophic futures, because I think that one's in danger of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy if one does too much of this kind of thing.
Even if
I try to be an optimist.
Well, Arthur, we will continue this another time. It's been marvelous having you here, and I hope you will come again and again, because we'd like to continue this conversation. I know I'll have several occasions to meet, but this small exploration of this remarkable human being, very unusual. You couldn't really think that such people could be designed by anybody. And it's a privilege to have him around and to have him stirring up things and giving joy and pleasure to lots of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.